All right, hello everyone. It is Germane again. As you know, we've been presenting this series for you, Journey Through the Galactic Heritage Cards, and we always recommend that you watch from the beginning so you can understand all the information in the order in which it was presented. So today we actually have 5 cards that we are going to review with you. We have one little extra bonus card that is here today. And that extra card is the card that represents the Association of Worlds. So you're going to see it as number 96, Community. And underneath, of course, it says Association of Worlds. So we're going to ask you to think back for a moment to a recent video. We don't believe it was the last one, perhaps the one before, where we were talking about the future Sirian or the third era Sirian. And there was one particular card that we talked about called Calling Our Parts Home. It's a card of integration, and most specifically, inner integration. So in actuality, that card is kind of connected to this one. How do we mean that? Well, when you look at the evolutionary process of physical species, as we have taken you through this journey of separation, where individual pieces of the whole go through this experience of not remembering who they are, of, in a sense, feeling separate and alone from everyone else and from the universe itself, that represents, of course, the outer fringes of fragmentation, let's say, the farthest away from unity or integration that you can get. But as physical civilizations then begin doing their inner work, and they begin to move on a path of integration, they then begin internally calling the parts home that they previously denied. What this begins to create then is an energy field in the consciousness within the individual and within the society of whatever species we're talking about, that there is a sense of inner community building. Meaning that as the parts that were previously kept separate are welcomed back home, even those painful parts, the entire energy, the entire consciousness of a civilization changes. And it is only then that a civilization is really capable of experiencing community on an external level. So you see that on your world now there are many, many attempts at community. However, these attempts at community often seem to fail, and a lot of that reason is because even though you are all fractals of the whole, there's not a recognition of that. And so there is often a lot of pain projected outward instead of worked with on the inner level. So when you get to the point then of the Sirian card that we were just referring to, of calling your parts home, and a civilization really begins a true and authentic process of inner integration, then that inner integration begins to show itself on an external level. And it shows itself on an external level by the civilization then having the capacity or the capability for the creation of community on a much different level that has ever been done before. So here you have then card number 96, the community card, the Association of Worlds card, that we felt we really had to put in the deck as a physical representation, if you will, of the Calling Our Parts Home card, which is the inner integration. This is the result of inner integration. As you well know, the external is a reflection of the internal, so all changes and all shifts then have to occur on the internal level first before they can actually be fully grounded in a physical reality. So here you have then the association of worlds, which is made up of all the civilizations who have already gone through their process of inner integration, which then leads them into the ability to begin to create an association on an outer level or a community level. Now, we do have to say that we know many of you watching this are Star Trek fans, yes? And the way the Federation of Planets, as they call it, is played out on your television, it's a nice story to help you begin to understand this idea, but it's not quite as structured in that way. When you get to this point of inner integration, there's no real need for rules and guidelines and things such as that, because literally they're not needed. Because when everyone begins operating from their own integrity, if you will, that integrity becomes the thread that ties all beings together. It's a very, very different type of reality. Okay, so we could talk a lot more about the association of worlds, but suffice it to say, in what we wish to say today, that this is a very important card that represents a turning point for the galactic family, in which the main players have now turned inward in terms of their healing and their integration, and finally have the capability of expressing or creating that integrity, that integration on an external level through the beginnings of the forming of communities. Now, of course, by the time that you've gotten to the point of communities in space, so to speak, you will have already begun manifesting them on your home planets. So if you have gotten this card in one of your readings, again, as always, there could be a lot of different interpretations for it, but we're going to ask you to look at it both on the internal and the external level. The internal level has to do with asking yourself, have you begun to form, in a sense, an internal community? What we mean by that is, have you begun calling your parts home? Have you begun unpacking those boxes, so to speak, loving and owning what is unpacking, so that you create within yourself a community of all your different parts? That's one way to look at it if you get the card. The other way, of course, can be a little bit more direct, that perhaps beings from Association of Worlds are connecting with you or are attempting to communicate with you. We very often use this card during some of the contact work and contact retreats as well. And also it can be representative of your external community, whether it's your family or your spiritual community, whatever it is. What is happening there? Perhaps it is time to make a shift or move to a new level in terms of your interaction with your external community. So we ask you then to just look at your life, look at the other cards, and with that in mind and what we have said today, this will really help you in understanding more of why this card came up on that particular day that you drew it. All right, so that's all we will say right now about the Association of Worlds. There's so much more to say about it, but the fun facts, so to speak, are not as important as the meanings of what this card signifies. So it is definitely a turning point. All right, so that's the extra card. Now we are going to move into the Zeta Reticuli. You know, they have had a very dramatic saga that they have lived through. And we've already gone through the first era, which is the past cards having to do with the time of their wounds. We've already gone through the second era, or the present time as it's listed on the card, which is the time of their healing process beginning. So now, today, we are going to talk about third era Zeta consciousness. This is a favorite topic, and it's often discussed in many contact retreats, because Zetas from this era really, especially in this time right now on Earth, this is recorded in 2018, we'd say the last few years, Zeta consciousness from this third era has really been working with a lot of individuals on your world. So in order to give you a sense of the consciousness of the Zetas in this era, the best way is to just examine the cards that we have here for this era. Okay, so we have card number 97. Again, it's Zeta, future, and which is, as we call it, third era. The theme of number 97 is enlightenment. All right, what does that mean, especially in conjunction with the Zetas? Well, in order to understand third era Zeta consciousness, you really have to understand first and second era Zeta consciousness. Because, as you know, they were extremely polarized, having separated almost surgically, that's a little bit of a joke, but separated the mental body from the emotional body and have lived primarily in the mental body until they saw that it was not a viable solution. It was, so to speak, a dead end. And of course, they went through then their healing process, which you can hear about on the other videos. All right, so now we get to the point where they are in third era consciousness, which is the era of awakening for all species. What does enlightenment mean? Now, we know on Earth you have had many definitions of it and also many misunderstandings of it. So we're going to try to give you a simple analogy to help you understand what is meant by this. Most of you have had what you call lucid dreams, where you are in the dream and you become aware that you're dreaming. Now, for some people, when they become aware that they're dreaming, it snaps them awake. But for other people, they can become aware that they're dreaming but still live and operate in the dream. And when they are lucid in a dream such as that, let's say, their energy, their perspective, their motivation in the dream begins to change because they start to understand that the dream characters are not real. This is a wonderful analogy for enlightenment, meaning that all of you here on the planet are like those dream characters. You're living an experience of separation, which is an illusion, for a very specific purpose. And the very specific purpose has nothing to do with any evil plots against you, of course. It has to do with simply the idea of the one consciousness wishing to experience that level of separation. So in order to fulfill that prime directive, so to speak, you actually have to experience the forgetting of who you are, the loss of your identity into the identity of the dream character. All right, so the dream character then is the illusion, and it can be likened to the human character walking around on Earth. And then you have the one who becomes lucid in the dream. And the one who becomes lucid in the dream can both experience what the dream character is experiencing, but is also quite aware that it's a dream. and that they could wake up at any time if they so chose to woke up. Now, let's say the little challenge with this analogy is that what we've just described sounds like a mental process. That if you just understand this mechanism, that you can awaken yourself. And it is not a mental process. It's actually more of an experiential process. So the idea of enlightenment in that sense then cannot really be forced. It's not like you can go to a workshop and become enlightened. But you can, through the development of calling your parts home, so to speak, and allowing yourself to become more whole, you can facilitate the process step by step, but then the process begins to take its own momentum, let's say. And awakening or enlightenment is the byproduct of the process of your integration. This is another reason why the Association of Worlds card is such a wonderful way to introduce this series of cards, because it, again, has to do with integration. All right, so yes, we could go off. We know we're taking a long time with each card, but the Zetas then, because they went through their healing process and their deep work of bringing the parts of them home, so to speak, that were previously separated, experienced waking from the dream, so to speak, which then allowed them to see the bigger perspective. So if you've gotten this card in your reading then, again, it can have a myriad of meanings. It could mean quite literally that there are Zetas from this era that are working with you right now to assist in your own awakening process. It could also be, let's say, a reminder for you to not get caught in the human dream, to continue to allow yourself to, in a sense, move back off the stage of the human drama and begin to shift your perspective into kind of a more non-dual way. And this is particularly helpful for people that might be going through a difficult situation with family or other struggles such as that. So we're going to leave it to you to interpret this in your reading, but at least you have an understanding now of what we're referring to, that it really has to do with waking from the dream and becoming more one with the primary consciousness of the whole, which is your natural state. All right, so sounds easy, yes? Until we get to the next one. Now we go to number 98. Again, Zeta, future, third era. Number 98 is the card of paradox. And this idea of paradox was actually also a key for your Syrian forefathers as well in their awakening process. We're not sure if we talked about it in these videos, but something that is called the Syrian formula has been discussed in some of the downloads that you can find on the website. What does this mean? Well, to put it quite simply, as you are living the human drama in intense separation, you go into a realm of polarity. All of you know that. And as you live in that realm of polarity, it becomes necessary to, in a sense, attach yourself to one pole or another as you go through your life. And from your point of view then, those poles are diametrically opposed. So black is not white and white is not black. Therefore, you keep yourself, in a sense, in this state of polarized thought and polarized consciousness. But as you begin the integration process, as you begin the calling your parts home again, and the inner integration process begins accelerating, what happens is that those poles that previously seemed so far apart begin to get closer, 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 So you're not perceiving polarity in the same way as such dramatic swing as you did perhaps when you were more ensconced in a third density reality. So as you continue to integrate, the poles get closer, 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 until you get to a point where you can literally rest in paradox. What do we mean by that? Where you can see both poles without the unconscious and compelling urge to choose one. You can see the truth in both, and you allow yourself to rest there in between the two poles, seeing and embracing both, not pushing away either. That center point of consciousness is the closest you can come as a physical being to your true nature. Now, we have to say that meditation is one of the ways, if it is being done properly, where you can facilitate a comfort level with that type of non-dual awareness. It takes practice because the tendency to attach to one pole or another is quite addictive to a physical being. All right, so if you've gotten then the card of paradox in your reading, what does it mean? Well, we would say in most cases it's an invitation for you to look at your life where there might be two paradoxical energies that are taking place. And it's also asking for you to resist the urge to make a choice to stay in polarized thought through whatever action you take. Can you use this energy of paradox as like a fuel source to grow your consciousness? Now, if you think about this intellectually, there might be smoke coming out of your ears, because the thought mechanisms of human beings are based on polarity. So you can't think your way into an understanding of paradox. The only way to come to an understanding of paradox, once again, is through the experiential reality of it. And in order to have an experiential reality of it, you have to put yourself in situations in which that type of experience can come to you, whether it is through contact work, channeling, meditation, sometimes even being in nature and allowing the emptiness of your mind, your thoughts to flow out so that you become an empty teacup. Those are all different experiential ways that can foster your understanding on an experiential level of what paradox really is. So if you get this in your reading, we really invite you to see it as a challenge, a fun challenge, to allow yourself to move to that place of non-duality within your consciousness, because once you do, the whole game changes, everything changes. Your perspective will grow in ways that you cannot fathom now. So then the Zetas, of course, for them, the paradox was the mind and the emotions. And they had to find a way to rest in the paradox between the two until they could make a shift in their consciousness. They eventually did, but as you know from their history, it was a long, long road. Okay, so next we have, again, we are Zeta, third era. We have number 99, mirror reflection. So this is also expressing similar ideas along the same line of what we've talked about, which has to do with the idea of polarity and paradox. Because a mirror reflection is like your opposite, yes? So when you look into a mirror, as you know mirrors in your reality, you don't see yourself as you really are. You actually see an opposite reflection of you. And in some of the very ancient, what we call Vegan mysticism teachings, one of the deepest lessons was the lesson of the reflective universe, which basically means that everything you experience in reality, when you are in a reality of separation, is a reflection of you. And nothing is outside of you. Again, we go back to what we were just saying, that if your mind gets a hold of this and chews it up, you might have smoke coming out of your ears. This is another one of those truths that can be absorbed and embraced through experience. So if you have gotten this card in one of your readings, we would say it's an invitation for you to look at perhaps a situation in your life where you're feeling stuck and allow yourself to see, to really look into the mirror of the situation and see what that mirror is reflecting back to you about yourself. Even if it's something you don't want to see, allow yourself to see the reflection without judgment. And when we say judgment, of course, we're referring to self-judgment. If you begin now, especially as you move into fourth density, to navigate reality from this perspective, the perspective of the reflective universe, you're going to find once again that your integration process begins to accelerate, and your, let's say stamina to sustain polarized drama gets less and less. You cannot necessarily sustain it anymore because your consciousness is at another level. This is also, we would say, one of the reasons why many of you are so exhausted by external drama, because as your consciousness is shifting, it's very hard to maintain a dual reality in the realm of drama at the same time. So it's an invitation then to move out of, let's say, the role of victim, and instead look at everything reflected back at you as a message or a lesson for you, which facilitates your own integration. This, again, was a very important lesson for the Zetas. Now we go to the final card we have here, which again, we are at Zeta Future Third Era. It's number 100. The theme is Ultimate Evolution. And you can look at this card as kind of the culmination of the cards we were speaking about previously. So it has to do with this journey from the fragmented fractal universe to the recognition of all the parts being a part of you, to the allowance of allowing those parts or calling those parts home within you, to allowing yourself to see those parts as reflections of whatever you need to see within you. And also that when paradox arises, remember what we said about paradox, it means the two poles are getting closer and closer and closer. So when paradox arises, it's a really good sign that your consciousness is approaching that point of non-duality. So all of that journey is represented by this card of Ultimate Evolution. If you get that card, the Ultimate Evolution card, in your reading, once again, it can mean many different things depending on the other cards and your life circumstance. It could also mean there are Zeta beings from the third era working with you, but it can also be an acknowledgement for you of the work that you have been doing on yourself with your own integration. Or conversely, sorry to say, it can be a little bit of a kick in the pants from the universe saying, hey, you better start doing this work. So we'll leave it to you to understand what the particular message is in this case. So now you have then the Zeta civilization, who were the most most polarized, most unbalanced, most resistant to integration, going through this process of, you could say, humility, opening themselves to finally seeing the reflections of themselves and going through this intense experience. Now, we do have to say, this evolution of the Zeta is extremely important, because where it goes from here has to do with hybrid consciousness. And hybrid consciousness is representative of many of the parts seemingly separate in the past coming together and forming a new consciousness. That's where we're going to move next as we explore this card series. So that's your cliffhanger for today. And we thank you so very much for your interest. Until we meet again, much love.